Joel Sherman from the New York Post joining us, and also does a great podcast every week with John Heyman called The Show. I'll get into it more as we move along here. Joel, great to see you. How are you? And I'm in New York right now, too. How pissed off are Mets and Yankees fans at the moment?
I'm good. They're probably bad, Scott. Right as we're speaking, obviously, the Mets real well. I think their fans are always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were hoping that with the expensive nature of this shoe, that maybe it wouldn't drop with an owner willing to sport a $380 million payroll and about another $100 million in tax. That wouldn't happen this year, but I do think we're seeing a bit of a chaos season in 2023. Is that new rules? Is it greater enforcement of the sticky stuff on the hands? And if you have older players, especially older pitchers, is it hitting them in a different way as far as their stamina with the new rules, or what they could do with spin without the highest level of sticky stuff? I don't know, but obviously we're seeing to some degree Dodgers, Astros, Yankees, especially the Mets struggle with teams towards the top payrolls and with a lot of veterans. And the Mets struggles are real, and I just don't know how they pull out of it unless Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander do a pretty good imitation of Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander.
So you've been in New York for a long time, and AJ Pierzynski despises New York. Everything
I was born in New York.
Exactly. He says there's always a New York bias. But the one thing that I want to hear from you is AJ's quote is, "The Mets will Met." Why is it year in and year out, besides 2015 when I got a World Series ring from them, why do the Mets Met? Is there something in the media? What is it? What is it?
Yeah, it was the New York bias that helped Derek Jeter win all those MVPs, I guess. Anyway, I think that the Mets have a cultural issue that probably was similar to the Red Sox at one point, which is when things go badly for a long period of time, you wait for the bad thing to happen. I'll share this story. The Mets were playing Colorado on a Sunday, probably about 5-6 weeks ago. And at that point, they were probably hovering a month into the season at about 500. And my rule of thumb is when a team opens the building to reporters, I'm there, because, I think it's your job, but also you never know. You go up to the press box, maybe you see people who are rehabbing, working on the field, maybe you bump into people. You should be open to the possibility of reporting at all times. And it was a very quiet Sunday morning, and I was moving around the building a bit. And I could feel it. The thought I had is, the Wilpons could leave the Mets, but do the Wilpons ever really leave the Mets? Like all the security people, the traveling people, etc. There's an infrastructure there that Steve Cohen hasn't gotten to. And you could have convinced me the Mets' magic number to be eliminated was 1 that afternoon. About how downcast everyone was. They had lost the game the night before, a tough game. But it was still, again, I believe it was the first week of May. And it's just that feeling around it of negativity. Now, is that greater today with all teams because of social media, and nothing quite appeases people on social media like being miserable 24/7, 365? I don't know. But there is a pall of negativity, and that the shoe will drop around the Mets. And like the Red Sox, does that only change one of these years when you break through? Would we feel differently if the Mets in 15 would have beaten the Royals instead of losing to the Royals? I don't know, but it's been a long time since 1986 since they won. And there's definitely this sense of things will go wrong. And just even take this. They've been around since 1962. They've never made the playoffs 3 years in a row. I think they've only made it 2 years in a row twice in their history. I think they've only made the playoffs in the same decade once, in 1986 and 1988. And, you were talking about New York. There are inherent, especially financial advantages in New York where you think the playoff arc would be different, that they could do something sustained. But they simply have never been able to sustain success. They won 101 games last year. And for good chunks of the season, you could have argued were the best team in the sport. And then they got eliminated relatively quickly at home by San Diego. And then again, they built in the offseason. And I think the feeling was, they'll be really good again. And they haven't been really good, obviously.
It felt like you were talking about the White Sox, not the Mets, not making the playoffs in back-to-back years and
Yeah.
not doing. I mean, why you got to take a shot at the White Sox? Why can't you just talk about the Mets?
I think you're making some stuff up here, AJ.
Thank you. That's what I tell them every day.
I think that's called straw man in other parts of America, but yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. So, Joel, lastly on the Mets, looking ahead at their schedule, it doesn't get much easier when you're running into Houston, some of their better pitchers this week. I know JV and Max are scheduled to pitch in this series. Then it's a Phillies team that's playing much better ball. Brewers have bounced back lately. Then they have the Giants running into the next month. My point being, I know it's a little early, but it's not that early anymore. If 3 weeks from now, they're in the same spot in the standings where they have zero chance, which I already think is the case in the division, and they're safe like they are now, 5.5 games back with a billion teams in front of them, are we going to be talking about others but focusing on Max Scherzer potentially being dealt by the team? Because if they're being realistic with themselves and they're not a playoff team, this team still needs a lot more farm system depth to be the Dodgers that they want to be and be a contender every year and finally make the playoffs in consistent seasons. So shouldn't they do that if we fast forward and this is what they look like?
I think it's good. Look, I think all teams have to be open to all possibilities. And it's, when you become defiant, about positions you won't take, I think it's a mistake by front offices. Obviously, the Mets have put an awful lot into the middle of this pot. I would say that if they were to become sellers, they would be able to do two things that I think are important. I think that they could let their fan base know, hey, this is a Steve Cohn-owned team. We're selling today, but we're not rebuilding. And you could take a look in 16, the Yankees traded Andrew Miller and Aroldis Chapman and Carlos Beltran, and actually played better after they traded him, almost made the playoffs that year, and then got to Game 7 of the ALCS the next year because they were kind of rearming as opposed to rebuilding. I think the Mets would be in the same situation. I think the other thing that makes the Mets interesting is Cohn is obviously willing to foot a bill. So if you put a guy like Scherzer out on the market or any of their players, to get the best possible return, Steve Cohn could simply pay the contract for the rest of the year. And I think that puts them in a different situation if they were open to it. I do think they want to try to wait to as late as possible. I think they want to see what this team might look like. I'll say this early on. Buck Showalter made such a big deal out of losing Jose Quintana, feeling that he would be kind of a lefty steadying force for them, somebody who would give them 6 innings pretty constantly. I think they want to see if they get to a point where can they get Scherzer and Verlander back better, Quintana back, and go round and round a little and see if they could ever get off a 15 out of 20, right? We might have had this conversation about should the Phillies be sellers 2 or 3 weeks ago, and suddenly the Phillies are a couple of games over 500. I think the Mets want to give themselves as much chance as possible between now and the middle, at least, of July to see what it looks like. But Scott, to your point, it would be foolish for them to fall, say, 10 or 12 under 500 and lose connection to even the final wild card and not have everything on the table, because whatever their prospect base is, I think even they would admit their pitching prospect base is dreadful. And if they were selling, they've got to improve in that area.
The other team in New York, the Yankees, are they too old? Are they too young? Do they not have enough good players? What are the Yankees going to do? Because since Judge has gone out, they're going free fall too. So what's their solution?
AJ, I think you gave the answer there. They're too old, they're too young, and they're too Judge. You guys know this well. Baseball teams are not supposed to be like NBA teams where you're beholden to one player on the level of, like if Jokic went out for Denver or LeBron went out for the Lakers. We're seeing it. I would argue that Aaron Judge's MVP case is made when he plays, and it's made when he doesn't play. His absence is overt. Stanton has fallen off a cliff. Donaldson has fallen off a cliff. LeMahieu's fallen off a cliff. Rizzo has fallen. I don't know about off a cliff, but certainly fallen, certainly from the beginning of the season where he was. Volpe and Oswaldo Cabrera, who I think they thought were going to be key parts of the team, they sent Cabrera back down. There's probably a question if they should do what St. Louis did with Jordan Walker and reset Volpe in the minor leagues. To the point of being too reliant on a player, their rotation is too Garrett Cole reliant. The others are not the same. I think they feel probably the same way about Rodon that the Mets do about Quintana. What will it look like if and when they get back Rodon? But they were saying that about Severino, and it hasn't been that great. They're Cole, Judge, and a pretty good bullpen. Is that enough? And what does Judge look like when he comes back? DJ LeMahieu had a foot injury last year and was a shell of himself when he came back. This is, we could say whatever the normal healing process is for a foot, but Aaron Judge is not a normal sized person. What does it look like for a righty hitter who has to sit on that right foot? And he certainly does as a hitter and puts all that weight on it and torque on it. And what does that look like for the rest of the season, even when he comes back? And, the only reason they won the division last year, they would have blown a whole 15-game lead if he didn't put them on his shoulders last season. So, they're too Judge reliant.
Joel, thank you for making my argument. I have this argument with these fools every day that Judge is the most valuable player. Ohtani's the best player. Judge is the most valuable. So thank you. Now let's go to a team that's not very valuable at the time, the Oakland Athletics. How is Major League Baseball letting this happen? And how is Rob Manfred, the commissioner of baseball, using the comments he made last week about average crowd size and this and that, and basically leveraging them to get to Vegas as fast as possible? Does Fisher have him in his pocket? Does he have naked pictures on Rob Manfred? Like, what is happening, and how is Major League Baseball and the other owners allowing this to happen?
Well, they haven't allowed it to happen quite yet, right? The owners still have to vote. I assume that we didn't get to this point unless it's going to pass and get through. If I knew that John Fisher had naked pictures of anyone of a substance, you would already have read about it in the New York Post. Look, I think that this has felt like a done deal for a while, which is what it's felt like from 3,000 miles away, guys, is John Fisher tried just hard enough in Oakland not to be able to get a deal and, wanted to get to Vegas. I do think there might be a bigger question someplace along the way, a bunch of bigger questions. I'll throw two out. One is about territorial rights. I think if 10, 12 years ago, the right thing would have happened and Oakland would have gotten to, say, San Jose, we wouldn't have been dealing with this issue. But I think we could probably make a pretty good case that there should be a team in New Jersey or Connecticut. But the Mets, the Yankees, the Phillies, the Red Sox, they're not going to allow that to happen. And the Giants didn't let Oakland get to San Jose. And that was significant. I mean, I would point out that, the NFL team left Oakland. The NBA team left Oakland also. I think at least like with the Warriors, there was another place in the general area to go that might have satisfied everyone if they could have just territorial rights wise 10, 12 years ago been able to begin to do something in San Jose. The second one is about any municipality kind of getting in the business of building stadiums and giving money. I was in Rome not too long ago, and the Colosseum is several thousand years old and somehow is still there. And here, like, I've covered ball games in my career is not several thousand years old, and yet I've covered ball games in 3 different ballparks in Atlanta, in 3 different ballparks in Texas. These things, they don't last very long until all of a sudden we need whatever the next newfangled thing is. I don't know that it's great business to be for the taxpayers to be footing this in any city, whether it's Oakland or Las Vegas or Newark, New Jersey or anything. I think there are larger questions here about who foots the bill and where we allow teams to locate because of territorial rights.
And now we're losing, if this all goes through, we're losing the 6th largest TV market and putting them in the 40-something largest TV market. Like, how is this decision as a baseball decision? Because Rob Manfred's the commissioner of MLB. Shouldn't he just be the commissioner of the Owners Association? And then it doesn't affect the MLB as a whole?
Well, Eric, you were a player. You were not naive enough to ever think that any of the commissioners of baseball were the commissioners of players, right? The commissioner is in charge of protecting the best interest of the brand writ large, which is MLB, and the owners. I mean, I wrote a column during the worst of COVID when the two sides were fighting that the players do have to more feel like the commissioner is on their side and cares about their health, the success of their careers, etc. Will players ever believe that? Probably not. I don't know that that's just a Rob Manfred issue. It might be. It seems like Adam Silver has a good relationship with players in the NBA. Uh, I look, if there's a movement to Vegas and the other owners go along with this, I assume there is some saleability to that there's something valuable about being in Vegas. I have lots of concerns about Vegas. I know you could say, oh, with an app, you could gamble any place, but it's the difference between I could gamble on an app and I'm standing in the middle of a casino. I'm probably much more likely to do it if I'm standing in the middle of a casino. So I'm worried always about the sports ties to gambling, all sports ties to gambling. It's not just MLB's. I worry about a team being there. As for the viability of the Oakland market, we could have a situation. We're going to have expansion. It's the sixth largest market, but there is another team and a better established team and a better team overall there in San Francisco. Let's see if there's even a thought about putting another team there. There probably isn't going to be. So we can throw the sixth market TV thing out. The question is, should they be going to Nashville? Should they be going, again, New Jersey,
Orlando.
Connecticut, there's
Orlando.
the Carolinas.
Orlando.
Yeah.
Orlando.
I mean,
No.
there's a lot of places. The fact that multiple teams have left Oakland is making a statement to me that might be louder than it's the sixth largest TV market.
So I listened to the show, Joel and John Heyman's podcast, which you can get through the New York Post or just on Apple, Spotify, etc. And you spoke to Kim Ng. So I want to get your thoughts on anything you took from that conversation. And then bigger picture, the state of MLB in Florida, because you finally have the Marlins playing good ball and they better do something at the trade deadline to improve their offense because fans have suffered there for years. I mean, this is the year to at least try for a wild card position if they're in this spot. Rays are playing great ball. Attendance up a little bit for them, but they still have a stadium situation to figure out. And then AJ just keeps calling for Pat Williams in Orlando to figure out a ballpark there. So just wanted to get your take on what's going on right now with Florida baseball.
Well, I think the Marlins, I'll take Kim Ng at a word. I've known her for 25 years. She said that if the team stays where it is, they'll try to make improvements. I believe they will. I've always had concerns about baseball in Florida. Look, I get it. Nobody likes going from Tampa to St. Pete, going over the bridge. I get it, rush hour, etc. It's hard to have it like the Rays have now showed they're going to be good every year until they're not. This is a sustained run of excellence. If you like baseball, they certainly play an interesting brand. They've got young players, dynamic players. I think you can make an argument that Juan DeFranco is the MVP of the AL right now, that Shane McClanahan is the AL Cy Young winner right now. They're certainly in the conversation. Arozarena would finish in the top 5 or 10. So would Yandy Diaz for MVP. So the fact that they still are not drawing at any significant level, we could now throw away I don't know if they're going to be a winning team. Is it about location? Is it about ballpark? Is it about that Florida just will not have a lot of attendance success no matter what you do? I'm sorry, AJ, unless we put a team in Orlando, obviously. I think there's a real there's been no sign in the decades that two teams have been there that they can sustain attendance, in a ballpark.
Joel, first of all, I'm not Brian Kenny, so you don't bite my head off here, but I just want to know this. Wander Franco over Shohei Ohtani for
No,
MVP?
I said he's in play.
Oh, no, nobody's in play right now with Shohei Ohtani, okay?
I
That was what he's doing. Listen, he's a great player, but no one's in play. Aaron Judge is in play, and it takes a historical season. That's it. There's no way. And listen, I'm the guy saying valuable.
It's not worth the fight. I agree with you. I agree with you because I had a conversation the other day where I actually asked this question. Have we reached, like in some ways, it's gotten to the point where we expect something out of him. But I would argue even if he had, say, like a 3.7 ERA and an 800 OPS, should he be the MVP? Like the fact that he could do those two things, like if he made 25 starts with a 3.7 ERA, wow, he's one of your starters. It's above average. That's great. Like that guy gets paid between $15 and $18 million a year now. If you had an 800 OPS, that guy gets paid between 15. It's still unbelievable. It's one player doing it. The fact that he's leading the American League in homers and leading the major leagues in batting average against. Well, the conversation's over. He's obviously the most valuable player. I just wonder in what year. It feels a little bit like it's going to be like Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan probably should have won the MVP every year for 10 years. And I think voters get bored of just writing in the same name of the player it should be. I think as long as Ohtani is doing both of these things at an above average level, and to your point, unless somebody is going to hit 62 homers in a season and carry a team to first place almost single-handedly, it's going to be hard to pick anyone but Shohei Ohtani.
And Joel, I also have one more argument about the, say it with me, Florida baseball stuff. Miami has proven over the years, the Heat, they draw when they're in the playoffs and they go to the finals like they did. The Dolphins, when they're good, they draw. The Marlins will draw. They're okay right now, but nobody really believes it down there still because we're not even to the All-Star break. Now, Tampa, yes, they win every year. The problem with Tampa, you've been to the stadium. The stadium is not the best. The location is awful. And I live in Orlando. It takes me an hour and a half to get to St. Pete. It takes me 45 minutes to 50 minutes to get to where the Lightning play, right? That is a gigantic difference because I don't have to cross the bridge. And most of the population, honestly, lives across that bridge, whether it's south towards Sarasota, and you got to cross the Sunshine, or it's in Tampa proper, and you got to cross the Courtney Campbell or whatever bridge you're taking to St. Pete. So that's the problem with where they put that stadium. So I feel like if they move the stadium, which they've obviously been talking about for years, much like Oakland, to across the bridge, towards Orlando, towards more where the Lightning play, and they have their stadium, I feel like they could draw as long as they continue to win. Now, any market other than maybe even Boston this year, look at them. They had a hard time drawing because they thought they were going to suck. So every market suffers when your team's not going to win. You put a good team on a good stadium in a good location, you'll draw. Look at the Lightning. People said, dog, hockey can't work in Tampa. You can't get a ticket to a Lightning game for anything. So I think it's a combination of all of those things for the Rays.
Yeah, I think I began my thing by saying I understand people don't want to go over that bridge from Tampa Bay into St. Pete and that it's a lousy ballpark to witness it. I will I'll also say this. Their TV ratings are generally very good, Tampa Bay. So it suggests that there is a fan base there. Perhaps if they could put it in a better place. I think the problem of comparing it to other sports is always about inventory. You know, the Dolphins are going to play 8 or 9 home games a year. The hockey team is going to play 40 games a year. And need to put 18,000 people into an arena. I do think it's different when you have to put 25, 35, even 40,000 people in a ballpark with some regularity for 81 home dates. It changes it. You need to have like a hardcore fan base, St. Louis, New York, Boston, the Cubs, etc., Dodgers. Those are the ones that seem to be relatively bulletproof, especially when they're good. Though to your point, you do see some empty seats in Fenway now that you used to not see. I do wonder what happens in St. Louis if this is their season. But I'd like to see it. AJ, again, we get into the situation. It's like the Oakland situation. You're going to move it to Tampa Bay. Is the municipality going to allow the ballpark to be built? And if so, who's footing the bill? Oakland and Tampa Bay have been on these parallel tracks of being unable to satisfy stadium issues for a long, long time now. And the fact that Oakland is leaving, I do wonder what the next step is with the Rays.
Joel, let's finish with this. One more big picture look at the league through rules, through trades. I know you like to talk about unintended consequences. What have you noticed from this season when you look at the big picture so far that's worth calling out?
Yeah, I began it by wondering what the impact of these the the new rules are and the greater enforcement, or at least the greater look into sticky stuff, it's hard to ignore that as we sit here today, the Yankees, the Astros, and the Dodgers all have the exact same record. I think they're all 39 and 33. They're 6 games over 500. They've all had significant injuries, especially in the pitching area. They're all going to be, and those are teams. I understand the Yankees haven't won a championship while the other teams have, but those have been kind of like the three kind of teams that have won a lot these last few years. I wonder what it means to have older players in this who didn't live under these new rules in the minor leagues and get adjusted better, or didn't prepare well enough, like, pitchers with cardiovascular of having to throw a pitch every 12 to 15 seconds. So I just think I used the term earlier, I think we're in a bit of a chaos season. Younger players, I believe the Tampa Bay Rays have not used a position player over the age of 32 this year. Watching the athleticism of the Diamondbacks, who are in first place, that they're having a good year. I just think that maybe we should expect things to be a little more unsettled this season, and at least 45% of the season in, wherever we are right now, I think it's about 40%, we are seeing something unsettled. Now, conversely, like, the Phillies began to play a little better recently. The Padres were playing better. Over 162 games, will we have this conversation on September 15th and go, well, here's the teams we thought would make the playoffs, and in 162 games, they caught all the upstarts. I'm not sure. The pitching injuries are significant, and the pitching of, certain pitchers falling back and not being very good. Certainly in New York with Scherzer and Verlander, I'm watching this. I think we've had some real disruption this season in what we expected, which I think in general for the baseball fan is good. I think what's going on in Cincinnati is good for the sport to renew the game there. I think what's going on in Arizona is good for the sport to renew fan interest there. It's important that every few years, your team make the playoffs and have something sustained, so that, we can find out if your locale will come out in force and support a winning team.
No, it's a good call on unpredictability. I don't want to get most of my preseason picks right. Sure, I like making money, but there's been times the last 3-4 years where you're like, it feels kind of easy to fill out certain parts of who's going to make the division, and then I don't want to be right. I want other teams to pop up. Nobody had Cincinnati if they end up winning this division. So
I think at the beginning of the season, Scott, I mean, it was substantial. The 6 teams that made the playoffs last year in the National League, if you went to any of like MGM, BetMGM, those places, or you went to any of the predictive services, Baseball Prospectus, Fangraphs, they had those 6 teams across the board to make the playoffs again this year. And then there was like a significant fall off to whoever you thought was 7th, whether that was the Brewers or the Giants or another team. I think it's probably pretty clear now we're not going to go 6 for 6 in the National League, if for no other reason. No matter how bad the NL Central might be, I just don't think the Cardinals can make up this ground and even get to, let's say, is it 85 wins is going to win that division? It's going to be hard to get there. So I think, the Cardinals, the Mets, the Phillies, the Padres, are all 4 of those teams going to make it? I doubt it. The Dodgers and Braves might, but I'm not sure about those other 4 teams, certainly all 4 of them. So I think we're going to have some real upheaval in the National League.
Yeah, I love that. We need that, frankly, in the sport. You got to give everyone a chance, or at least think they have a chance, fan base wise, heading into the season, or at least most of them. I know we can't speak to a few of the bottom feeders, but Joel, this was great to talk again for the first time in a minute. Thank you for joining us here, and for everyone, for our fan base at Joel Sherman 1. You can follow him there. You can get all of his articles there on the New York Post, and then you can see his show. I guess lastly, for a plug for you guys, do you have something coming up on your show this week with Heyman? Because it comes out tomorrow, right?
Yeah. And the way our show operates, I don't know about yours, we're sitting and juggling 2 people right now. So I hate to say which one we're going to have, because they both could still turn us down in the next, I guess, 5 to 10 hours before we have to fully settle it. But yeah, I wish I could tell you, Scott, and draw some traffic there, but I hate to tell you we're going to have X and then we end up having Y.
That's fair. We deal with that every day. What?
Scott, I don't know about you guys, but John and I, we're not only the hosts, we're also the producers who get the guests. So, like, yes, And then oftentimes, like, John's trying to get one guy and I'm trying to get the other guy, and then we see who has the stronger will to who we put on the air.
It's good competition. We're all competitive. We all have texts out pretty much all the time. So yes, we deal with the same guest booking fun, and often we find out who wins in the morning. So we'll retweet when you've got who you've got tomorrow. But Joel, great to catch up with you. Appreciate the time, man.
All right, guys. Thank you for having me on. Best of luck with the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Joel Sherman from the New York Post joining us here on Foul Territory. A lot of good stuff there. I would say my favorite line, and I